This week on the 3RINGS podcast.
There is a certain level of comfortability at which you get to being a top-level commercial dancer that you can kind of coast in for a while.
Don't let anyone else dictate the progression of your career is the only advice that I would give that I think is actually healthy advice.
We're always dancers.
I don't necessarily believe in the concept of an end of the dance career.
Welcome to the 11th episode of the 3RINGS podcast. My name's Stuart Bishop and I'm here with my fellow director and pal, Bailey J. Muir. How's it going, Bailey?
I'm good, man. That was very nice. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Good. So before we dive into today's video, hit subscribe on the channel, click the like button and turn on the notification bell so you know all about the next episode.
So this week's topics are day fees versus year fees. Does the industry understand the reality of the fees they're trying to charge? Next, the evolution of a dancer's career. When's the time to make the step up or even to give up? And then finally today, we're going to be talking about Tate McRae, Maddie Ziegler, Blue Ivy and Sofia Boutella, all famous and all dancers. Before we delve in, don't forget you can also check out our latest guest episodes. We have episodes which you can click the link below with Adrian Gass and Mr. Brendan Hansford. So Bailey, let's get into this. Our first topic, I read it out there as day fees versus year fees. Does the industry understand the reality of the fees they're trying to charge? Why don't you talk us through why we're saying this?
Yeah, so basically I just wanted to raise a bit of a conversation around how much understanding we have of the fees we're putting forward. What is the thought process behind the fees, if there is any, and do we understand how they compare to other industries? Essentially, where this is stemmed from for me, I've been on this sort of path for a few months now. However, a few months ago, I basically tried to do some research. As we all know, we all get taught that our industry's badly treated, undervalued, all of these kind of things. So I decided to do some research to see how badly we weighed up in comparison to other industries. And when I did that, it actually took me totally by surprise that I found the opposite reality. And all of our fees that we're taught are low are way above basically anything else in this country. And it just has brought me to this weird kind of realization, I would say, that maybe we're not quite sure ourselves in whether we are badly treated and low paid or not. Maybe we have a bit of a warped reality.
What you're saying is, let's get this. Let's really get this straight. If someone was to charge, say, 200, or let's say 250 for the day, and we're thinking, or the industry is telling us, no, you should be charging for that day rate 350. Now, what you're saying is to find out a true value of a day rate, you've got to times it by to find what it would be as a yearly rate. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's the way that we need to look at things, because ultimately that's the value that you are really charging your client. I feel like in dance, we sort of have this mentality at the moment that we overcharge the client to make up for the days that we don't work. But I don't think that is fair on the client, because they are only paying for one day's work. And I'm kind of in this space of it's the dancer's problem that they're not employed the other day, not the client's problem. They have no idea whether you are around. So in their head, there's 260 working days in a year. In their mind, you're saying you are worth that every day of the year. Therefore, if you're charging $350 per day, you're worth just over $90,000 per year.
Is that fair, though? Is that fair to do that? Is that, because I can hear people, dancers, performers, in their heads, I don't think they'll be able to understand exactly what you're saying and why it should be that. They're seeing it as just, it's just one day of work. So surely I should be charging more.
I think the tough thing with this is yes, you're only doing one day's work, but you should be doing that one day's work every day. In a dance sense, that's not quite the reality, but it's not the client that should be punished for that. So I do agree that it should be a little over a standard day rate for other industries. But the reality is, like, £350 per day is like over £200 above most industries in this country per day. The majority of our fee is actually overpricing. And when I say overpricing, I mean overpricing to other industries. Not necessarily that we are overpriced, but I feel like something needs to be found in this. And again, where I want to come to put this to you as a question, and kind of for the audience as well, can any of us actually break down what factors make up a dancer's fee? If we're compared to the housing market, you're going to be judged on, is your house detached? How many bedrooms does it have? Where's the location? Is it near to the shops? Is it near to a school? And that dictates the price. What actually dictates the price of a dancer when every dancer is put out on 350, for example?
So what you're saying is there has to be some kind of medium of being able to work out that fee. Is that what you're saying? Otherwise, it's like we're just chucking it. It's like we're pissing in the wind. We're just chucking. What's your fee? Blah, blah, blah. That's my fee. But if what you're saying is there needs to be some kind of medium which you hold that fee up against, and what you're saying is the easiest thing to think of is, well, just comparing it to a yearly annual fee. But what about, though, if the fact that you're doing different jobs, because in other industries, just playing devil's advocate here, in other industries, obviously, they're kind of doing the same job, where, let's say, and are we talking about maybe dancers underneath a certain level, whatever they're doing, you're saying is going to be probably the same value, even though this today they might be just standing on a set doing a music video, sort of doing some dance, and then the next day they might be doing I don't know, dancing at a exhibition or something like that. Like,
I feel like if you can't put factors on top to work out what your price is, how can you even justify not being paid only minimum wage? You've got to know what your factors are that are pricing up. And where I say this, in my mind right now, I'm almost like, I can't say the 350 per day is definitively wrong or definitively right. I almost feel like it's artist by artist, and this is why we need an actual structure as to how those fees come together for then everyone to be paid on a scale. I do believe there is some artists in the industry who should be paid above 350 per day, but I think there is an awful lot who actually trying to get them 350 per day is damaging the evolution of their careers to ever actually build them to a point that they can consistently get booked at 350 and above. It's like we need an intro level. For example, to compare to other industries, I jotted down some facts before to compare like the wage levels, which will be a good little indication. Your standard commercial dancer right now is being put out at 350 per day. Over 260 working days, that would work out at £91,000 per year. When we then compare this to other industries, and where I'm going to try and pitch this now is, what should a graduate be paid? The people at the start that should obviously then be the lowest tier if we had tiers. A junior doctor is paid £29,000 per year. Over 260 days, that would be £111.54 per day. A newly qualified teacher is on £28,000 per year. That would be £107.69 per day. And a newly qualified police officer is on £21,000 per year, £88.77 per day. In fact, a fully qualified, experienced police officer tends to have a max wage of about £41,000 per year. Now, just think of that in comparison to our £350 dancers that are £91,000 a year. You're worth basically double the amount of a fully qualified, experienced police officer. And where I say this now, if we come back to the graduate, comparing a graduate dancer to a junior doctor to a new teacher, if you were to drop a graduate's wage to like £153.85, they're still worth £40,000 per year. That's still £11,000 more than even the junior doctor, who was the highest paid one of those examples. And this is what makes me think, how can we look at a fee of 350 per day and think anything other than that is low? when 150 per day is still considerably above all of these other industries that are deemed as life-saving, crucially important to the running of the country. What would you think on all of that, Stuart?
You're going to come across the argument of, yeah, but we don't work every day. And I understand what you're saying. I understand the way we're working now. We're starting to see things differently. I can't see some of the top level dancers seeing past that argument. They're not going to, they won't want to hear any of that, I don't think, because the ones who are making the arguments for more money, better conditions, are basically the ones who are at the very, very top, and they're the ones who feel that they deserve more, and are the ones really that do deserve more and should be paid more, and perhaps maybe they should dare to go even further than they actually are, because if you keep going, you don't have time to complain. But when you stagnate, that's when you start to look around and you start to think, well, how can things be better? Why aren't we getting this? Why aren't they getting that?
So to jump in on that, I totally agree with everything you've said there. And actually, any dancer that wanted to pitch those arguments, I'll be like, yes, you're correct. And actually, I think if you just flip the way you sort of dissect this, you start to realise the problems you're pointing out, this whole thing of maybe dropping a fee is a solution to. So firstly, to address those ones that are like, yeah, but we don't work every day. I think that's exactly the problem. What you're finding there is to try and counteract the fact you're not getting enough work. You're putting your fees up, which is then preventing you from getting more work. It pushes you further away from work. The problem you're attaching to is we need more work. How are you going to get more work? Actually change your supply and demand, make yourself more accessible, and you're going to get booked more. So if you're not working enough, I feel like you've got to drop your price. Something isn't working. You've got to become attractive.
I can see it now. Nah. They won't want to hear that. They won't want to hear that, because what we're also getting to between the lines is those people possibly aren't quite good enough to be asking for the fees that they're asking for. So because they're only seeing as, well, we're not getting work every day, so we've got to ask for more money. But people will pay if they think it's worth the value. So if they're not worth that value, people just won't pay, and they can't afford to pay. So they're outpricing themselves in the end of the day, because people will only pay. They can only, especially now. People haven't got the money, and they want, or should I say, a lot of them have got the money, but they want to make sure they're spending it wisely.
So let me address then the bit with the top end, to then come back to this and then address how it's comparative and how it would help both. So then with the top end, them that would panic at the sound of dropping fees, I would actually go, well, you don't need to worry about that. The point of this is actually where I said about 5 minutes ago, I'm not saying the 350 is definitively right or wrong. Some people are worth more and some are worth less. The top ones, I feel like the dropping in those fees would actually then allow them to go above as well. Because you start to build a system which then goes, yes, you are more valuable factually on this basis of how your fees are now made up. So they wouldn't actually have to worry. I feel like this would push their end up. Now, to come back to how these are comparative to each other, again on this supply and demand level, how is the fresh graduate ever going to get consistently booked when they're worth exactly the same as the dancer who has an established name in the industry, has done every single job, knows every choreographer, every client, is absolutely trusted? If you're trying to charge the same amount of that person when you've not done a single job yourself, how are you ever going to book? I feel like to actually start to build a career, you've got to be priced below that. Otherwise, it becomes winning a lottery. And it's the same then with those on the top level. Whilst your top level is being put out at the same price as the new level, the bottom level in a sense, how is the client going to value you at the value you should have? because you're communicating, you're not worth anything more. So I feel like our industry has this sort of thing where we strive after increasing the minimum rate, then everyone gets the minimum rate. And therefore we push the minimum rate to like a crazy high point. And that actually is creating issues in itself. We need to separate out from the minimum rate, and the minimum rate is for the brand new people. Everyone above, probably like a year, 2 years into your career, you probably shouldn't even have to think about that minimum rate anymore. It's giving dancers a route through their career so they can build their value. Every dancer, even if they started on 150 per day, should have the opportunity to build right up to being £1,000 per day, £2,000 per day. But what I'm trying to say is you can't do that overnight. The thing we have at the moment where we put dancers out overnight on 350 per day, their first day out of college, yet that is basically, well, over £200 more than a junior doctor, a new police officer, new teacher. How, when we actually break this down and open up a conversation, can we start to justify that?
It's interesting because really the people at the bottom, or should I say the new graduates, they're not necessarily going to be at the bottom. Some might come out and be amazing, but generally they are the graduates are the ones who are the inexperienced, the ones that you would trust less because you haven't worked with them or whatever. They're the ones who are actually less prone to argue about money. So it's like a conversation has happened over a period of time, not because the people at the bottom, I think would take whatever, because you're at that point in your career where you are so happy to have graduated and then you get your first work. It's not about the money. I always remember it wasn't about the money at the start. It was the prestige of having credits and telling your friends you were working. So that whole section really aren't, I don't think, worrying about what we're talking about. And I think if you were to say to people in college, when you first come out, this is the price, the pay structure, they would take it. They would take it because you're not a revolutionary at that point. You're just thinking, I'll do what I'm told until I learn that actually, what our industry really is about is, I suppose, being your own creative individual. But you have to have the courage to do that. And I always recommend to jump through the hoops at the start to find out what the rules are, to know how to break them. It's the other end that have created the problem. And, everyone underneath, I think they would be fine. And I think coming back to roundabout of your question, I think it needs I don't know actually whether this was a question or not, but I think people need a structure. They need to see a path which is put to them by the industry. Oh, this is this is what you're expected to earn over a period of time. I'm sure in football, an agent will say, look, well, you're only in League Two, so you're not, this is how much the top League Two people are being paid. I don't know.
This is at any other industry. This is why you have a junior doctor, and then your actual doctor. And then you might actually then get a promotion from that to then be in charge of a whole department of the hospital, for example. There's routes through it. In dance, you're just a dancer at the start of your career and the end of your career. There's no route through it. You're not a £150 dancer, then a 200, then a 300. There's no structure there. And this is another thing with that top end that I'd love to actually have like one of the top end dancers on and ask them this question. Of these people that will try and challenge it and be, I think I'm worth more than that, I'd love to actually open up more of a conversation around what is going through your head at that moment. When we break it down, are you actually trying to say you're worth more than 350 per day? Or are you trying to say you're worth more than the other dancers being put out at 350 per day? Because again, it's the reality of the fee. The fee is highly paid. So actually, would you be comfortable with that 350 if you knew that that was the top level and the others were beneath? Whilst the graduates are on the top level, I can totally relate to being frustrated at being 10 years into your career and still being paid that when you were paid that on day one. But I think it may be more of a question of, is it wrong that you're being paid that now, or was it wrong that you were paid that on day one? Do you know what I mean with that?
Yeah, well, also, it would be interesting to ask them, truthfully, do you think everyone else around you is the same value as you? You know, because it's like they're asking, oh, yeah, we're all, you know, truthfully, you know, I remember being, you know, in auditions and thinking, right, well, okay, there's maybe 3 or 4 in here who are better than me, you know, and because you start to give yourself that sort of chance. Oh, what chance have I got in audition? So you look at your other dancers and you think, am I better than that person? What's my, you know, that person's rubbish. They never get it, you know. So we must have those opinions on value and pricing. You know, does for example, just trying to think without going into names really, but you know, it'd be like you asking me, right, Stuart, rate different choreographers that you know, yeah, or that I worked with as a dancer. I wouldn't want to do it. So it's easier to say, oh, well, I think we're all part of one bracket. We should all be paid the same. But generally, most people deep down will think that they're worth more than that person or whatever.
Yeah. And it's adding the human element to it as well, isn't it? Like on that choreographer level, let's take Brian Friedman. Is he worth, let's say, £5,000 per day because he's a choreographer? Or is he worth £5,000 per day because he's Brian Friedman? I feel like that's what we need to find in this, a human level, not just they're a dancer, so they're worth this. I feel like that's like treating the dancer like it's the price of milk. I mean, you can charge whatever you want, but everyone's got to keep it at a relative rate because how much difference is there between milk? Yeah, you can have green cap or blue cap, but what the hell? There's not much between. Fresh graduate to someone that's done every job in the industry. There's such a range there. And I feel like we often hear this phrase thrown around that like artists need to treat themselves like businesses. And I feel like this is almost an element of that never gets addressed. It is. You need to treat yourself like a business. If we look at another freelance industry, let's take a window cleaner. They're not going to charge £5,000 to clean windows if there's only 2 clients in that area that can afford to pay that. Because then you've got 2 bookings a month. It doesn't make sense. So you're going to drop your price to get the bookings. As a dancer, does it make sense to charge £350 per day before you can sustain a career on £350 per day? And I feel like this quite possibly is where we have this whole thing attached to our industry of a dancer's career isn't sustainable, it's not consistent. It's because we try to charge fees that we're not consistent on. We try to raise the fees before we've even become consistent where they were before. So you're pushing yourself further away from bookings. Actually, you need to become consistent to then bear the risk of increasing. There's so much more thought needs to go into what you are charging for yourself. What's the point in charging £350 per day if you're going to get 1 booking a year? Then are you really having a dance career?
Well, listen, if you're only getting 1 job a year, you need to be charging £100,000 for that, or 90 grand for that day's work, isn't it?
And this is the thing: as soon as you do that, you're not getting that job either. So I feel like, again, when we drop it, we're going to get more actual work because more clients are going to be able to afford to use dance. So there's going to be more jobs in the industry. To relate this back to the Spotlight episodes we've done over the past few weeks, like 90,000 performers, 2,500 jobs. It's clear we need more jobs. We're not going to find more high-end clients because they're already working with dancers. We need to attract more low-end clients, and that's going to mean low-end fees. The reason they haven't come into our industry right now is because they can't afford to pay a dancer like 3 times the amount that they will pay any other worker in their business. If we can drop and find a tier for them to sit in, it becomes a client those dancers can build their careers on. An example I love to give whenever I've tried to have this conversation with anyone before is if you go back to, I mean, this is way before my time, but Smooth Criminal was that the 80s, Michael Jackson?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that music video was a whole month's shoot. You would never hear of that happening anymore. And I think the only reason for that is that it just wouldn't be affordable for production. But actually, if we could drop the fees, cut your fees in half, you're still being paid more than the junior doctor, the new teacher, the new police officer. And suddenly, because you're being paid half as much, the client can book you for twice as many days. And there's a whole pattern that then goes on here. And even if it's not more days, it's more dancers, therefore more people working in the industry. It's about creating opportunity. And I almost feel like every other way of getting more work is being exploited. So the fact we still need so much more work than there is now, I can't think of another way to try and address that without lowering the fees to attract people. When DFS want to sell a sofa, they put a sale on.
Yes, you're right, DFS do. Do you know what? I feel like we need to move on because otherwise we could talk about this forever. But before we move on, I feel like you just opened up a little can of worms there of are we hinting that at a certain level and below, performers are thinking they are bigger, more special, more valuable than they actually are in reality, you know?
I think it's a warped reality in the industry where we're taught to believe it. This is, when I was trying to explain it right at the very start of this topic, what I'm saying is like, still as an agent, when I see a fee come through that's below 350, even though I have now had this realization, I still panic when I see that. And it's almost like rooted into my brain that that is low. And you can't break through it even when you've had a realization. I feel like that's exactly what's going on. We're so educated that we're low paid that we can't even comprehend the fact that we are highly paid.
I've often said, when you reach the top of being a dancer, you're top of the bottom, which I don't mean that in any disrespect, but it is, you are at the top of sort of the bottom rung of the entertainment industry as a dancer, as a jobbing dancer. Now, I don't mean that, and this, you know, unfortunately, we're not going into the third topic now, but it would be a good link. You know, there are dancers out there who are breaking through, and we're going to talk about them because, you know, if you are a famous dancer and you've got your own workshop tours, your own clothing line, your own all these things, then it's a different ball game. But as a jobbing dancer, we might need to bring down our value of the reality of our value down a little bit to actually get more work.
I think especially within the commercial industry, this is such a thing. Like when we compare it to the West End, for example, the like basic equity minimums for West End are actually pretty relative to that junior doctor, new police officer range. It's only commercial dancers and commercial actors seems to be the only place that just throw everyone out on a £350 fee. It's almost like we've not got the infrastructure within this little sector of the entertainment world that the other areas have. It's not the whole of entertainment, not the whole of performing arts that even have this warped reality. It's just these little subsectors where commercial dance sits.
There you go. Well, let's move on. We're going to talk about now the evolution of a dancer's career. When's the time to make the step up or even to give up? Now, this came about from a comment that we received from Raymond. And thank you for that. Do you know any of these things that we're talking about? We love to hear your viewpoints. We love to hear get your comments. Raymond, I think this was on one of our earlier episodes. He left this comment, and we were like, yeah, we need to talk about this. This was the comment. So I've now watched both episodes, and yes, subscribed as well. Thank you, Raymond. Yeah, if you haven't subscribed, get on it. You know. And I'm glad to see you guys back on your feet after the great lockdown stroke shutdown period 2020, 2021 and into early 22. It's been fascinating to see from afar how the London studio scene has morphed into a very competitive arena with all the new guys on the block. I'd be interested to see the following elements covered in a future show. Dancer's career at the start, peak, and when things come to an end. No one really talks about number 3, but it's a fact that, especially commercial, no one's career extends much beyond 30. Anyway, keep the videos coming. So, first of all, sitting here at 45, my first comment to that is, it's interesting because often people want that kind of advice. What do I do next? So I'm coming to the end of my dance career, and I always think, well, if you're coming to the end of your dance career, then you must have made that decision that you're coming to the end of that dance career, because no one makes that decision for you. You're the one that makes that decision. So it's either that you're falling out of love with it, or maybe you've got or should I say people, I'm not aiming this at Raymond, just generally at dancers. It might be that you haven't got that perhaps enough belief that you can continue your dance career, and also the perception of what a dance career is. I'll throw it over to you, Bailey.
Yeah, I think there's one extra side as well that is kind of the second part of the dancer's career, as he addresses in that, which is the peak. Sometimes the end of your career can come if you've not fully exploited your peak, because then even without your own decision, you can then start to fall back off. So it's also how wise were you in that highest moment, I think, is a big, big factor. So to really dive into this as a topic, I think the best place to start is the beginning, as Disney would like to sing to us. So the very start of a dancer's career, what would you say is the usual route of the start of a dancer's career? What advice would you give to them? What do you think the normality in the industry is, Stuart, before we then dive into what our advice would be and maybe an outside of the box way of viewing the start of your career?
It would be, if you know that you want to be a dancer at a young age, it would be after school theatre school, then going to college, and then going into the profession. That's, I would say, the 3 main steps would be.
Yeah, that definitely is the traditional route, isn't it? Which people will already know having watched our podcast. But we couldn't disagree with this sort of route more at the moment. This typical thing. Go through college. I think not last episode, the one before that, we addressed all of that. Obviously, college comes hand in hand with join Spotlight, join Equity. Equity right now, start was doing this podcast I was against. Now my mind has actually changed, to be completely honest, if I'm transparent. But Spotlight, everyone knows where we stand on that, and I think the industry finally feels to be aligning on that. So to take it outside of the box, I'll throw this your way in a minute, Stuart, but my advice right now, to be honest, would be, as soon as you know you want to be in the industry, just get yourself in the industry. I think moving down to London is becoming hugely important again. There was this period in the pandemic and just after that everything was still self-tape based, so you could be outside, didn't really matter. Now, the self-tapes are still around, but in person is very much back. So I feel like now you've got to be in London, you've got to be taking class, you've got to be able to turn up for the audition the next day kind of thing. You've got to be there. So that would be my first piece of advice. Get to London. Once you're in London, then get in bass, get in Pineapple, Manor, Playground. Start training with the people who are actually going to book you on jobs. And I feel like this is a big flip from the college method. We addressed this in the podcast before last, but that is now, I would say, in my opinion, the best route to training. So it's get to London, get training, and audition at the same time. Then when you're on a job, that's going to pay for your training. When you're not on a job, you just keep training. And to be honest, you should keep doing that through your whole career. That would be my sort of, I guess, outside the box way of going about it, which I feel like is going to become the new method over the next few years. What would you say, Stuart? Do you agree with that, or would you have anything else to throw in?
Well, being a little bit older, it's very hard for me to come to that conclusion, which I am coming as well. Is going to a college, is it? I just think they're just not seeing the same industry, and why put people through this? And if you're spending the same amount of money, let's say you're spending money to be taught by people who haven't possibly made it, and also can't teach you to their best because you're one of loads, and they can't also if you're being taught at college, they can't give you that sort of favoritism or that let's go for let come and hang out with us kind of thing. It feels like if I had the same amount of money to go train, I could get in and I could get further by doing it the non-college route, which I don't know. I can't, for me, it feels wrong to say that. But at the moment, I can't see the difference. I can't see the professionalism. Definitely, you get taught at college and you get taught to work more as a team. But I think you could learn that very quickly on a job. If you suddenly get on a job and you're the wet between the ears one, and you're sort of the least experienced, the hope is the rest of the dancers. This is a little bit like the football kind of talk with Roy Keane was saying the other day. He was saying, well, when a new lad would come in, it's up to the dressing room to make sure that person is on it. And you should be able to go on the job and see others who are doing it correctly. However, what happens when we get to the point when no one's been to college and everyone has, I don't know, maybe we might have to lose some professionalism. I don't know, or I suppose it would just be trained and taught in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's the studios down in London are still the same big hitter teachers that are at the colleges. So for me, how different can that training really be as long as you do train properly when you're in London? And I think as well as the value in a money sense, I feel like there's also value in a time sense, which is very relevant to this topic. Obviously, the standard way of looking at it, which we will address in a little bit, is dance is a short-lived career. I'd say probably like someone having a 15-year-long dance career would be looked at as a very long career. 3 years training is a fifth of that. So you're actually sacrificing a fifth of the time you could be working by going to college. That's a hell of a lot of time you can claim back if you can train and work at the same time within the studio scene. I think kind of like the first topic, I'm not saying your first year of training at a London studio, you should be booking the Brit Awards, or I always want to say X Factor, even though it's not on anymore. But those low-tiered jobs that drop in the fee should bring into the industry. Why can't you be booking them? And they are the jobs really to learn your craft, learn how to be professional on set. If you need to, learn respect. And I think respect is something that we always credit the colleges with, but it's something I always struggle with in my mind as well. Because I feel like most people are good people. There isn't many people that need to be taught respect, yet we always credit it to the colleges. I feel like that would organically present itself in this dancer's worth working with just because they're a good person, whether they went to college or not.
Yeah, no, I do. When I think about through my life, there's only a few people who I think, that he was a naughty boy. Do you know what I mean? Or he couldn't, that person was always late. We all know a few of these people, but generally people do toe the line because we all want to get on with each other. We don't want to take jip from somebody else or.
Yeah, and those ones that are a bit of a trouble cause or turn up late, they tend to be the ones that did train at college as well. So it's a question I've always asked, like, is that just something we generically credit college with just because we hear everyone else say it, so we say it as well? Or actually, is that not just a factor on how that person is as a person? I think this is very similar to the episode we did with Adrian last week. Like, I almost feel like you can't teach personality, and that is a personality trait. When we look at Adrian's nature, that obviously didn't come from Performers College. Yeah, Performers College enhanced him an awful lot to enable him to have the career he has. But the crux of the person quite clearly came from his life experience. So would he still have the same attitude without going to college? Whilst I don't want to speak for Adrian, my impression would be yes, he would, because he's just a genuinely good person.
Well, it's interesting because before I went to college, I was kind of a bit of a wayward soul, and the college discipline made me see that I had to be a better person, and just more on it. So for some, college will change them as people, because it might be the first time they're actually around, people. I remember I went to a BTEC college to do BTEC in Performing Arts first, and you're not around anyone. You just go in and out, and sometimes you do classes. It was very, very loose. So the first time I ever had proper sort of where I was doing something I wanted, i.e. not school. In school, my discipline was terrible because I didn't really like what I was doing. But when I was at dance college, I was like, right, well, I want to do this. So I was like, right, I'm going to have to learn to be disciplined. I'm going to have to learn to be kind and polite and all these things. So for Adrian, I think he's probably just always been like that. But for someone like me, it definitely enhanced me, the discipline, and gave me that sort of structure.
So just to break that down a little bit more, because I think this will be good to recognise where that came from for you. When you're at college, like, the way you describe it there is the factor that made you want to change is just because you enjoyed what you were doing. So if that's the only factor, would you not still get that from being in the London studio scene? Or do you feel there is something else that came with college that created that maybe we need to keep hold of?
The consistency of it, I would say. The fact that it was every day, and would I be going to, with the freedom and the money, would I be, I never saw the money. I got a scholarship. If I had the money to spend, would I spend it on class? Would I spend it on the things I need? Would I be, do you know what I mean? This is where the old argument about colleges outside of London, are they better than the ones in London? Sometimes I used to say, well, those people who train in London, they know all the choreographers, because going to Pineapple back in the day wasn't a big thing to them. Going to base, if their college is only based down the road, then they're probably going to dare to do that more. Where if you are at a college outside, the big thing is going to London. So I don't know. It's whether people have the same discipline, of going every day, and when they're not being told they have to go, because don't get me wrong, I loved dance college, but there were some days I fucking hated it because I wanted, I wanted to stay in bed, or I had an injury, or just, someone had pissed you off or whatever. So
just to challenge that one, apologies if this is like a bit of like an attack on character on young Stuart, but is it someone else's responsibility to make you a success? If you decide to flake off class and not go, is that anyone's fault but your own? And therefore, I still would have to ask, is that a justifiable reason that colleges should exist? Should they have to make you a success? So I feel like in a sense that would also limit the level that they can actually do for you. They need your commitment. It shouldn't be them forcing your hand.
In the end of the day, once you start paying into the college, they want you to come because they don't want any type of, we might have to give him a refund or this and that if he leaves, but they have to, it's up to the college to motivate and make sure that the students who come feel good and want to be there. It's not their responsibility to make an old Stuart or a young Stuart, a good person or time efficient or anything like that.
I guess there's a generational difference here as well, because obviously when you were at college, like, I've just clicked into you're talking there like 20 people to a year. In that sense, they do actually have the time and resource to help you and guide you and sort of push you to commit the way that they can see deep down in you actually want to do. Whereas where we are now, 100, 150 to a year, that's where now generationally I actually come from a side of, is that college's responsibility? If they're doing that, every other student that is committed is losing out because they're putting too much time into making young Stuart come along. And I guess this could also be a bit of an issue with the numbers game in the colleges of, can they still be looked at and credited in the way they were in the 80s, in the 90s?
It was in their interest to get young Stuart because there weren't many boys. When you've got so many coming out of especially boys now, when you've got so many, maybe they don't care as much. Maybe it's like, well, okay, look, half of the class is more than the half of the class now is more than perhaps the whole of the class back then. So if we only get half of them good and half of them disciplined, then we're still doing our job. It's like if you're in a football team and you've only got 12 players, then only one person's a sub, and that sub is probably going to get on a lot. But if there's a whole squad, then and suddenly the manager says, right, we're going to do squad rotation as well, your place becomes a little bit less secure. I just suddenly thought that there's 3 parts to this this topic.
I was just going to say the same.
The comment was, when to know and what to do when you get to your peak. I would say with that, because I think the final part of when things come to an end is a bit more juicier, so we'll talk about that. But I would say go watch Adrian's podcast that we did because there's a great story there where he has that decision to make, and it's like he could have kept going, but he didn't want to keep going until he was forced to not keep going. So I would say my thing for when you're at your peak is to know when you're at the peak, and know sort of, is it going to get any better than this? Am I happy with what I've achieved? Is it time for me to move up or to bigger things? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean moving away from dance. Normally, it means dancer, choreographer. That's the next thing. However, it could be dancer to superstar dancer, which again would be a great link into our third topic, but we're not quite there. Why don't you talk about the last part, which is when things come to an end? You're probably the worst person to say that because you haven't, you haven't got to that end, I suppose. You made that decision early on that you wanted to go into casting, actually. So maybe you are a good person to talk about it.
Yeah. So this actually, for me, I feel like this is a good place to get me to talk on, because for me, the peak and the end are one of the same. I don't necessarily believe in the concept of an end of the dance career. In my mind, even though I don't dance anymore, this is still a progression of my dance career that I'm doing right now.
We're always dancers.
Yeah. And I feel like to align it with myself, first of all, I wouldn't be able to be an agent if I hadn't been a dancer. So I don't see a separation in careers between the two. And this is where possibly there's even just something in the language of it being dance career isn't necessarily healthy. Is it more that we should actually say our entertainment industry career? Because it's all aligned. You don't get to the next step without doing the one before. So they are connected. It's not like you've changed careers. You've not actually been a doctor 1 minute and then you're now a lawyer. It's not that vast a change. It's all one linear career. And where I say this, I almost feel like it's like promotions within an industry. If you're in the army, you're probably going to start off on the front line. But when you go up to become then the commander, you still class that as your army career. So for me, I feel like it's how you use your peak. To compare this to Adrian at his peak of being an on-stage talent, then when I can't do this for too much longer, I can't sustain it for much longer, so let me go into choreography. And this is a very perceptive thing, but in my eyes, that means that Adrian is still in his peak, 10 years on from what would be perceived by some as the dance career peak. So I guess what I'm trying to say, for me, it's almost a way that you view your career. What would you say about that one, Stuart?
Yes, I think you're right there. It's whether you see it as you will just keep dancing, or you know, right from the very beginning. For me, I always was right. I want to be a dancer, you know, for a bit, and then maybe go into choreography. It wasn't until the moment I became a dancer and saw that, oh my God, look, these people get much paid better, respected better, and I could do less. You know, I always saw choreography as a way to be able to do less, but get paid more. So, you know, and choreographers would probably, you know, top choreographers would probably have a go at me by saying, you know, it's you do a few hours work and then you sit back. Do you know what I mean? Just you sit back and you chill, and I used to love that part. The part I hated of the choreography was actually getting up and having to bloody do it. So no wonder Arlene Phillips has always got a smile on her face. But I think, what's the question?
Just sort of what your opinion is on that end of the career side.
Yes. It's that perception. It's that, have you got a plan? If you haven't got a plan, then you're going to keep dancing until, well, now I'm going to have to get a part-time job. And then suddenly you're not dancing. And then suddenly you become that person that says, I used to be a dancer. And I've never ever, even though I've not been a professional dancer, I did a year. That was it, you know. But I will always call myself a dancer, and in a sense, I'll always be a choreographer. You know, I would say I'm more of a. If I had to choose, I'd say I'll always be a choreographer, but I had to be a dancer to get to that. So if I didn't get to that, I would always be a dancer.
I feel like to quote something from Adrian's episode last week, which I think is like a really invaluable sentence, is he said there's no formula to a dance industry career. And I feel like really that is the nail on the head. If we want to look at the dance career as just the on-stage part, it becomes way easier to try and fall into this trap of going, what's the formula? What do I do after that? And I don't think that's correct. Like, you can be a dancer, then be an agent. If I wanted to, I could come out of retirement now and dance again. There's no formula to it. You do what you want to do at the time you want to do it. I almost feel like trying to give advice on it is bad advice. The only advice really is just do what you want to do. Follow your instinct. If your mind's saying become a choreographer at 21, then do it. There's nothing stopping you. But if your mind's saying I want to dance for 5 years, then do it. Almost don't let anyone else dictate the progression of your career is the only advice that I would give that I think is actually healthy advice.
And good advice. Funny you say that, because when I was 21, telling everyone that I was going to be a choreographer, I had the whole world telling me, no, you're stupid, don't do that. And when I told them that I wanted to be an agent as well, fucking hell, Jesus Christ, no one's put. And the funny thing is, it's like, you're still young enough to come out and do that part, do the actual dancing part. Obviously, if I said, right, I'm going to be a dancer again, it would be silly for me to go and audition for parts which are going to be cast to 20-somethings, you know. But I could still be a dancer, and it's about pitching yourself in the correct position where you should be, and can be cast. You know, if I had to be a dancer, I was like, right, okay, I would probably reshape myself as like a robot popping kind of old guy, and market myself like that, and get some workshops, and you know, and before I know it, I'm putting on my own shit and then, right, I'll release this and I'll do that. You've got a plan.
And this is where I'd also say there's something in capitalising on your peak. Capitalising on the peak, even if your plan is to keep dancing for as long as possible, can allow you to have no end. Like, if we take someone like Antoine de Beck on Strictly, I genuinely believe he could go out on tour when he's 80 years old and people would still come along. Because he's used his peak to build a name, build a reputation, that now he has fans. People love him. And therefore they're going to come out. And if he doesn't want to stop dancing on stage, he will never have to. Yeah, he's not going to dance as well as he did at 25 years old, but that doesn't matter. What would matter to him if he's decided to keep dancing is just that he is still dancing. So again, it's using that peak, which I feel ties us quite nicely into our third topic, which is a growing collection within the entertainment world of, my mind automatically wants to say former dancers, which is almost what this whole topic is about, that should they be addressed as former dancers? And it's people who've come from dance that have then built this great career and they're doing other things. And this is almost an extension of what I've just been trying to say of capitalising on your peak. So to throw a few names out, you've got someone like a Tate McRae, who right now is probably in the top 5, top 10 most trending artists in the world right now. Music artist, that is. At her core, she is a dancer. Her career progression has come from posting dance videos on YouTube as a child. That then she built a following, then started to post some singing videos, got a record deal, and she's now doing these huge live performances, music videos of her own songs. But she is very much a dancer in the videos, in the performances as well. And you've got the likes of a Maddie Ziegler, who we all literally still know her as a dancer. And she may be, in fact, I don't think this is controversial to say, she must be in like the top 5 most recognisable dancers of all time. Yeah, I mean, like Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly. Who else are you going to throw in there?
I think with Maddie Ziegler, I think maybe that's, I don't know, there'll be a lot of arguments. Older people who won't have heard of her, who won't have seen her, won't know. However, a whole generation would know her as, right, wow, look, in the Sia video and the whole Dance Mums thing and all that.
So in terms of dancers that you can actually like call by name, she's got to be way up there, even though I think she's still younger than me. That is such a huge ride through almost purely dance. It's incredible.
We was also going to mention this Sofia Boutella.
Sofia Boutella.
Sofia, yeah. I hope we're saying her surname. She was the original, she was the Nike girl. During the noughties, Nike suddenly got on board with professional sort of commercial dance and started sponsoring dancers. And she was this funky breakdance girl who, over the years, has been in so many films. And you go to her Wikipedia, it says actress and dancer. And this is the thing. I was going to give an example of Lionel Blair, of old dancers. He's dead now, and you might not even know who he is. But Lionel Blair was a TV presenter, but he was a tap dancer originally and used to always put in, sometimes he'd do a little bit of tap routines, a bit like Bruce Forsyth as well. But he was always known as a dancer, even though he was a dancer when he was like, it's a bit like Nigel Lithgow. Nigel Lithgow was a professional dancer as well. People will now know him as a TV producer, but the very fact that he's sitting there as a judge and the creator of So You Think Can Dance is, or one of the producers, I don't think he created it. One of the producers is, again, there's someone old who is a dancer who is still in their career. Arlene Phillips, there's so many people who are, once you're a dancer, you're always a dancer. And it goes to show by saying all these names that it's very naive to think that, a dancer's career has to come to an end of having to dance in, teach at a local dance school or set up your own dancing, or move into being a yoga teacher or something completely different. There is a route to becoming, by using dance at the start to break into the entertainment industry and go right to the very, very top.
Yeah. Again, it's a whole perceptive shift, isn't it? I feel like there's a language that we use within the dance industry as we kind of address it, that we almost limit ourselves from acknowledging these higher levels of dancers. So we will often, as we already have this episode, almost make the mistake of calling the dancers on the Brit Award the top level dancers, not even acknowledging that there is a Sofia Boutella sat above that who's literally about to star in what is going to be Netflix's biggest biggest film of the year, quite possibly the biggest project Netflix have ever done. She's the star name. Tate McRae, who's literally topping all the charts right now. We almost detach from the fact that they are dancers and therefore lose perspective of what the actual top really looks like. For example, with someone like a Tate McRae, this is a very sort of on my generation, so apologies to anyone who's listening who may not even know who she is yet. But she is someone who, at her heart, is still very much a dancer. And where I want to go with this is often when I talk to dancers at the start of their career, I'll go, what's your aim? What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? And it'll be, I want to dance in a music video. I want to dance on an artist world tour. Tate McRae's taking off both of those boxes. She's dancing in her own music video. She's still dancing in the music video. The choreography she's doing is exactly the same choreography as the dancers in the music video. Same on her toes. So it's like there's this whole other world to achieve those dreams that isn't just having to book the job. And I guess there's also something to really sort of acknowledge and encourage here of becoming the artist. You don't necessarily need to be the working dancer to achieve all of your dance career aims and dreams. You can do that through artistry, which actually probably has a lot more longevity in it. So there's something to address there. Obviously, with Tate McRae, not everyone's going to be a singer that can have these music careers. But take Maddie Ziegler. Really, she is just a dancer through and through. But she could now produce a full dance film, have it in cinemas, and it will be a success. There's a way to do it if we just change the way we think about how to build our careers.
Well, Sofia Boutella, she was in, I think it was Step Up 2. So she street dance too. Yeah, street dance too. So, so it's not like she made it was like, she was a well-known commercial dancer. And then went into stratosphere being this Nike dancer, and then started getting these little film parts which included Street Dance 2 and stuff like this. But it's for those you're saying people might not have heard of Tate McRae or Sofia Boutella. First of all, Tate McRae is all over the BBC at the moment. There's articles on her and how she's made it. So I think she is breaking through even to the normies, to the NPCs. But let's give them a proper example. Jennifer Lopez, not a proper, but an older one. Jennifer Lopez, Paula Abdul. These were all. Jennifer Lopez was a professional dancer. Paula Abdul was a top choreographer. So it's there for people to make to make what they can of it, and I think as a dancer you have so much opportunity within your dance career. Much more than maybe the same level actor, you go do your thing, you go away and you have to wait for that next opportunity. With dance, you can go to a dance studio, there's a lot of fingers, a lot of pies to sort of get into, it seems, at a much cheaper level than obviously an actor having to create their own film and writing and stuff like that. However, I've forgotten my point.
I can say, because I've got something to say anyhow, which is to throw a question at you, where I'd love to hear your thoughts on if you think this exists, if so, why you think it exists, what might be behind it. Where an observation I would make is I feel like within the dance world, we often discredit the dance element of someone's artistry as soon as they start exploring any other artistry. For example, with Tate McRae, I feel like a lot of dancers now would go, if I tried to use her as an example of this is what can be achieved, they go, yeah, but she's a music artist, not a dancer. Whereas someone like a Justin Timberlake, he's not discredited as a musician because then he started to do some acting, and vice versa. Same like Dua Lipa now is starting to cross into films. That doesn't mean she's not a musician, and no one's saying she isn't an actress either.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether they actually care. Do they care about dance? You know, because they once they see him as if you see someone as an actor or an actress, you don't really want to. You don't. It's only us, the dancers, who care. Maybe. So it's like, why would you put your former job on? You know, if you said, right, this is what I do, you wouldn't tell other people, but I did do that and I did do that. So
I guess what I'm asking more is like, as an example, using these people as an example, why do you think the dance industry doesn't? Well, do you think the dance industry like almost refuses to look at them as an example? To give the comparison again, when Timberlake goes into acting, other musicians then use that as an example. Oh, I could make that cross as well. But I feel like dancers won't look at a Tate McRae to the same level and go, I could make that cross.
Yes, I do think that. And I think it's because well, I think we both know the answer here is because once you get to that, there is a certain level of comfortability once you get to being a top level commercial dancer that you can kind of coast in for a while. And during that period, which you can, I mean, some people have dragged it on for years. You know, in my head, it's like once you get to that point, that's when you should be moving up. Because you've got the momentum, you know, you don't want to move up when fucking you're on your way down. So it's like, do they really want to acknowledge that actually, you know, that comfortable position you're in is again the top of the bottom? Probably not, you know. So I'd rather not hear about Tate McRae. I'd rather not hear about this person because they're telling me now I've slogged all this way to get to here, which I thought was the top, and now, there's a little door opening showing, look, there's other dancers right up there who have made it further. I don't think they want to hear that, maybe.
Yeah, I think another observation to give with this as well is like, we've addressed it before on here, the whole influencer scene, how that is building, and so many of the dancers who become then a dance influencer, I literally hear them audibly getting discredited as, yeah, but they're not really dancing anymore. They're not a proper dancer. Why? They're having success off the back of dancing within the entertainment industry. When you break it down to the crux, is that not exactly the same thing that you as the professional dancer, as you want to call yourself, are chasing after? I'm almost trying to ask a question of like, are a collective of dancers blinding themselves from reaching their own potential by just not wanting to admit that there's something else that they could and probably should be doing as well as what they are right now?
It's this fine line, isn't it? Are we accusing of the top UK professional dancers of basically having to create scenarios and discussions because they're not willing to just forget about it and go above and go for even more? Maybe another topic for another day.
It's like being overly precious with the industry, isn't it? The way you want to see it happen. And therefore actually just not acknowledging that something else is happening. There's like some bias there that like needs to be like untangled, I feel like.
You mentioned Blue Ivy yesterday when we were going through this and we were just making our points of what we wanted to talk about. You mentioned the name Blue Ivy and I was like, who the fuck is Tube Girl? It was Blue Ivy? Because I heard Blue Ivy, and for those who don't know, why don't you say who Blue Ivy is and what she got to do with this conversation?
Yeah, so Blue Ivy is Beyonce and Jay-Z's daughter, and basically on Beyonce's latest tour, Blue Ivy's been coming out for a certain song as one of the dancers. However, Beyonce, I think it's 2 weeks ago now, released like a film version of the tour. And within that, there's some like behind the scenes footage of Blue Ivy talking about how that moment came around, how it came to be that she was going to come out on stage and being integrated with the dancers, why she wanted to do it. And there's something in her energy within these bits of interviews in the piece that really feels like there's something in her that wants to become a dancer. And obviously because of that whole Beyonce, Jay-Z, just her name alone, Blue Ivy, is almost a culturally relevant name within entertainment already. If she becomes a dancer, that is going to be such a huge deal for the dance industry. She's an instant dance star.
How old is she?
I don't know for sure, but I'd estimate probably 13, 14. So not far from really being able to be seen as a professional. But yeah, I feel like there's something fascinating going on within the entertainment culture at the moment, that like dance is really breaking out. When we look at Tate McRae, when we look at Sofia Boutella about to star in Netflix, look at Blue Ivy seriously looking like she's seriously considering a dance career. Maddie Ziegler being absolutely top of the game. There's a whole dance scene going on within entertainment that poses so much potential if we could tap into it. And I'd include the influencers in that as well. And this is where I think it's really important to have this conversation about how we kind of integrate the dance industry with this dance scene that's building and allow both to thrive, rather than keeping the commercial scene separate and letting that just keep ticking away at its normal level, when this is a real opportunity for it to burst into action. What would you say with that, Stuart? Do you observe that same thing happening, or is this another generational thing, would you say?
Yes. I don't know. It's one of these things. I feel like me and you are always going to have this this generational kind of, not disagreement, but whether we just see things differently. I don't know. I don't know whether it's we're just picking it up because we're into understanding and knowing and seeing people's paths, or whether maybe it's always been like this. But then I'm thinking, has it?
I mean, I feel like when you go back to the 50s, there was a period that was exactly this with MGM. But somewhere along the lines that was lost. And now, is this the opportunity for it to come back?
Well, you had acts, you had like the Nicholas brothers, for example, with Tap and, and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and obviously Frank Sinatra was an amazing dancer as well. Like, it was, you had to be good to get, the order of the day was like musical films. So you had to be that high level and you had to be good. I don't know. I think it depends where it all goes with the content over the next few years. Is it that we're seeing that opportunity? So we'll make that opportunity by creating things for us, or is it just other people will just trundle along and they won't see it, and you'll just get the one or two that break out, who do see it. I definitely think the more conversation about it, the more people will come out and think, well, instead of just being a jobbing dancer, I'm going to go straight away and be a choreographer and create my own brand and be an influencer and, and do this different route. So it might come down to just, it's more, will the route change? Will the aspirations of a dancer change? And will that change within the training? Here's training which costs $5,000, which will get you jobbing dancer jobs, and here's training which will cost you $15,000, but will build you an empire.
So it's like what I'm seeing is when I compare to that MGM era, obviously they were creating these brilliant dance films then because they had a dance star, they had Fred Astaire that they could put in there as a lead role. So they then knew that film was possible. And this is, in my opinion, this is now like the first time in, well, it'd be like 50 years really, won't it? Like the first time in 50 years that there actually are now enough dance stars at the top that Hollywood could look and go, do you know what? We can probably actually make a dance film again without too much risk.
Well, you say that. First of all, it's not 50 years. 50 years would take us back to the 70s and 80s. Funnily enough, at the end of the 70s and 80s, you had all the dance movies. Flashdance, Footloose, the break dance movies, which were huge. These were huge, Dirty Dancing. There was a generation of dance movies. So, I don't know the people, and at the time there were people like Cynthia Rhodes who played BB in who was the woman who got knocked up in Dirty Dancing? Is it BB? No, Baby is, don't put Baby in the corner, innit? Whoever the people will be screaming, they will. Whoever Johnny's old girlfriend was, the blonde one. Her name is Cynthia Rhodes, and she was a very well-known dancer. And she was also then in Flashdance. She's the one who has the who's doing Going on a Manhunt. She isn't the main, but again, a dance role. And also, at the same time, you had like Debbie Allen, and you had the whole kind of Fame series, which was massive. And you had dancers like who was the guy who played Leroy in Fame was a well-known famous dancer. So there was a period. It's gone out of fashion. Maybe it'll come back into fashion to bring dance and really push it.
Yeah, I definitely feel like we're in a prime moment for it to burst. And this is why I feel like it's important to keep trying to have this conversation. Because we need to exploit this moment, otherwise it's going to pass us by and it's not going to happen. I really feel like this is the best opportunity we may have in our lifetimes and careers to actually position dance on an equal level to the music industry, to the top level Hollywood actors. Because Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, they were seen as that. So often now people will say it's not possible to reach that as a dancer. But it's historical evidence. It's just finding a route back. Right now we're in that moment. I really hope somehow from having these conversations, even if it's not us, this might spiral someone watching somewhere along the line to do something which really fires it off.
These are the type of conversations we have off camera, and quite often we go, "Oh, we should have been recording that." It's you got to figure things out. And you've got to see a path, and as a dancer, as a performer, you've got to look and see what's possible. And I think anything is possible if you think big, if you dream big. I've got there you go, little dream big. If you dream big, one day you'll get there. And I think it's all there. It's all there for dancers now, especially with the influencer scene, to build and create bigger platforms. And then from that platform, you then you get to meet different people, producers, directors, and it's up to dancers to keep going, to keep believing and keep bringing it in. In the end of the day, it's like, as a dancer, what would be your favourite thing to do? A movie which has got dancing, or a pure straight movie? Probably as not as gay or straight, but as in a pure, just straight-laced acting. I know which one I'd want to do. I'd want to be doing the La La Land.
I guess it's looking at stuff like the influencer scene and just being like, is that a shortcut as we tend to write it off right now, or is it just an alternate route to success? We've got to look at the alternate routes. Anyhow, before we go on too long, we might as well wrap up. So before you leave us, hit subscribe on the channel, click the like button, turn on your notification bell so you know all about next week's episode. I think this will be the last one releasing before Christmas. So have a great Christmas, a happy new year, and we will look forward to coming back to you soon. See you all later.